absolutely. So, let's see, where did I start? I'm trying to back up far enough.
Yeah.
I mean, again, our program is, so it's supported by local government, and it's actually something that we're doing as part of Washington State solid waste grants. So they, support their communities to pursue projects around all sorts of waste prevention topics. So we obtain these grants on behalf of the county, and we've partnered with WSU Extension, again, for their support. They, the kind of the backup of the college and the research. It has a good home there. So, and we often share even staff. I kind of contract with them to do some of this work. So, the state has definitely been eager to fund things like waste audits in schools. I think really trying to develop data and sort of greasing the skids, so to speak, for the full-on food waste bill that did pass the legislature a few years ago. And so this will hopefully will take off in the next few years of really seeing it more equitably distributed and supported at many schools to measure and study and implement ways to reduce their food waste. So we just, again, in our recent years of having these various grants, we've certainly reached out to schools and offered waste audits as an educational tool, also in hopes of again supporting the implementation of regular composting or some sort of food waste awareness at least. So let's see, I think it was 2017, I could find those exact dates, is when we did do a waste audit at an elementary school. And that was just a one-day event with all of the, the whole school participated when they go through, they walked, I don't know if they have a cafeteria. I think they eat in their classrooms, but they come through the kitchen and grab things. And then they had a small team of students and parents that were, measuring everything, sorting the different types of waste. So they measured out, kind of food that could be reused, such as, milk in cartons, things like that, even apples, things that before COVID certainly were considered reusable, oranges and things like that. And then, of course, they also did the non-edible food waste. And I think they also tried to capture things like silverware, like trying to kind of sort out things and just see what that waste stream looked like. And I do have great pictures that I can use with permission of the kids, kind of there with their sorted food or waste stream, I guess. So that was sort of, that was a one-time event, but it was pretty awesome. Again, we have struggled to kind of keep the momentum going. For instance, that was led by a waste prevention specialist who was a parent as well, and she was super motivated. And when she left, I don't think, and then especially with COVID, we have lost a lot of the momentum in the school around that kind of work. We had gone back with our food safety specialist and looked more at the kind of pre-consumer portion of the cafeteria and had identified some places where maybe food could be reduced. Specifically, like pre-wrapped sandwiches are pretty common in cafeterias nowadays, and they make 20 tuna fish sandwiches, and then they'll often use them the next day. So they claim that they use most of them, but they'll also say, probably by the end of the week, we always have a few, 5 to 15, and we're thinking, well, with 8 schools in our district, that adds up, and those are really nice. You can eat those when you don't have a kitchen to cook in, kind of a thing. So how could we rescue those? And turned out like time as a temperature was a big effect there. Or time as a control instead of temperature as a control. We sort of identified that as a barrier. They were using time as a control versus temperature. So they couldn't guarantee it was safe.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that we kind of were making progress with the school that way, but again, COVID hit and our waste prevention specialist moved away, so we haven't got back in there with that school, except, well, that's not true. There's another parent there who we did help get a grant for to improve their compost systems because they have a garden, and then that was including food waste from the cafeteria, even knowing that the kids aren't actually eating right now at school whatsoever. But the idea was to set your systems up using this grant to potentially do some cafeteria composting, and it was supported in part by those activities that we did before, because it was another state grant that was about sustainable schools that have showed some sort of activities towards towards food waste reduction or sustainability activities. So that felt like a small win, even though it's actually been like the span of 4 years and it's very slow going. And
is that grant just a one-off, like once a year kind of thing? Are you going to have to apply every year? Could that keep you guys going to do this for multiple years?
So there's a number of grants at play, really. There's one that we're working off. Yes, local governments, every single county in the state is eligible, but you kind of have to renegotiate what you want to do with it every year. And we have negotiated a small, tiny bit every year for food recovery, composting education, food waste education, some component of organics management, knowing that is has a great connection with climate, and knowing that our community needs some tiny way to plug into those activities, different teachers, if they do a project. So the other school that we have worked with is the high school. When I say the high school, we do have a number of high schools in our county, but the biggest one actually, we've done a couple. We worked first with their environmental science class, and I had gone in and done kind of taught about the waste stream in general. Shared some of the measurements that we have about it, kind of breaking it down into its different components, and then the students committed to doing a waste audit of the cafeteria food, and that was kind of interesting. What we ended up discovering is that most students actually leave the cafeteria. It was kind of incredible. I think it was, again, maybe that's something that could have been better planned, but we just found that, most kids leave the cafeteria, they go off campus, or they just go sit somewhere else in classrooms, outside, and they end up using like one of 20 garbage cans around the campus, instead of the ones that were set up in the garbage can where we were kind of waiting. So we didn't feel like we got very good measurements. It was more of a lesson learned around that in terms of what happened to the food waste. And then so then in the next year, we were planning on doing something similarly, using those lessons learned, where we were going to actually partner with a local farm and that does do food composting, so we can kind of take everything, because that's a bit of the challenge is once you've taken it, then you end up throwing it all in the garbage, and how are you breaking stuff down, like meat versus, we ran some composting programs in our schools that, you can't have meat and you can't have oranges. There's so many things you can't have, versus in communities in our state where you can take everything because they have these large industrial composters.
Yeah.
Because we don't have one of those, we're constantly kind of like, oh, we can't have that. It's like we're in a home composting setup. So we were kind of trying to just say, well, if we wanted to truly measure this food, we'd want to be able to take everything and take it to this farm that accepts everything. And we were going to partner with them, and even the EPA, our local branch, was pretty excited about it. And then, COVID totally hit when we were still sort of in planning mode.
What was the reaction for the elementary school kids? What was their reaction when they saw the food waste?
Oh gosh, I mean, so I actually wasn't there. This was my contract employee was overseeing it, but I definitely remember a lot of, of course, just like wow, and parents even, of course, being kind of blown away. All the parent volunteers, custodians of what that looks like, and I could certainly I'm still in contact with her, though she's moved away. If you see if and I can dig through some of her files. I don't know. I'm sure we tried to capture a little bit of the sentiment in a report. I can dig in, try to see what I can find.
Like, how did you actually, like, in terms of measurement, were you doing, like, pounds or of different categories, or how did you measure it exactly?
Yeah, we have some little, just like fish scales, ones that, like, parents were strong enough to hold up. And so we would do that, we would sort everything into 5-gallon buckets, so you could tear that out and then add in the waste and get that measured. That's a great question, because one piece of feedback from my few experiences, I also audited the college years ago, our local community college, with a high school student that I was tutoring, so we did a big waste audit there, and it's very difficult to measure the weights. And so right now I'm in phase 2 of a recycling audit that we're doing with our grant of measuring recycling, and I've measured it in volume, and I continue to tell the folks there that, like, at my grant funders, like, that is just the easier thing to do, is to have a 96-gallon can or whatever and fill that up. And then there's just no scale that I can carry around or lift up that I can really do a good job of getting, good measurements on. That's a really hard thing to do with a mobile audit. And the visual is kind of what gets people anyway. I mean, when you stack different kinds of materials, especially, of course, the edible food, stuff that's still edible is always an interesting piece.
What would you say is most challenging about getting the general public interested in food waste?
Well, I mean, I have to say that food waste, they love to talk about food, right? That is such a kind of a universal interest. And I think it's very valuable to people. Like, they know innately that they spend a lot of money on it. It's delicious. It represents something to everybody kind of in their heart. So talking about it's not as hard. I think for us is, having the funding for education programs is always hard, that you can do something effectively to really reach enough folks. And just getting people out of their bubbles, especially the last few years, has just been an overwhelming few years. So it's been, I mean, when the pandemic hit, we were, again, I had some really good funding for food recovery. And we had done some pilot food recovery. Actually, forgot about that. We did a pilot food recovery with that school, and we were getting some of those sandwiches, or even some hot sandwiches, and we were kind of piloting the idea of, like, okay, if we can get this within the hour to another meal program, can that work? If we were, sticking within the time that food was still considered safe. And that was challenging, but we got some, and some minor amounts. But so as we were going to build on that, we've started talking to some other, again, local food. We really worked to kind of build up the concept of food recovery with our distributing organizations, food distributing organizations, and then that piece that we need restaurants and food service places to participate. That's been the harder market to tap, I guess, so to speak. But when COVID hit, for sure, it just felt like a very sensitive topic, as well as the food safety was a big concern. We reached out to our partners like at Food Lifeline. I'm sure you've heard of them. They're kind of, I think they're international, or at least they're maybe North American, but definitely across America. Harvest Against Hunger, partners like that, of like, how do you safely do food rescue? And I think at that point, they were so focused on just how do you safely do food distribution that food rescue was like too nebulous. Food banks totally changed their model for a while of distribution. So I think that whole piece just really dropped out, and it was just hard to talk about food. It became a more sensitive subject as folks were really struggling financially, and so I think, that was great that the Shrink Food Waste kind of fell into our lap as a project they were working on, and that we could, let's try to incorporate some of this program into our work, and
and
be something that could be online.
That's definitely a huge bonus. And I hear that other people are interested in adopting that curriculum as well, so they've reached out. I think that's what Clea said. Have you... sorry, go ahead.
Nope.
So you've done these projects with schools, but you're also are you doing like countywide kind of food monitoring of food waste?
Yes, I mentioned that in my email. I hadn't really figured out how to go about that, and then because again, our state does try to measure from every county, a whole host of commodities, including food, recovered fats. And they do it in two ways. One, they do these kind of waste audits of local, dumps, essentially. They do that every 5 years. But then annually, they basically send out a voluntary survey to all sorts of organizations and governments and try to get them to report. And those are the stats that we use to do all of our planning. But definitely food waste is not very robust. So we did update our management plan this year. So we did have an opportunity to talk a little bit more with various organizations about reporting their food waste. And what we did do on behalf of organizations was just the food banks. That again, they most of the food banks, there's a whole network of food banks and food distribution, nutrition providers, and they actually work pretty close together since we're sort of on the edge of the earth here. They work together to redistribute among themselves, get shared shipments and then distribute on farther west. And so there's a couple of main food banks that really take in the grocery rescue, and so we reported that to the state after checking with the state and saying, well, does Food Lifeline do it? Because a lot of it's coming through Food Lifeline or these big organizations, and they're like, no. And I had actually talked with the state, the guy who does all the stats at the state years ago, and said, can you contact them and ask them, I don't want a double report, but this is a significant waste stream that is not being measured very well, right? Grocery rescue, again, just in our small county, I think it was like 160,000 pounds in a year of food that was, again, coming off grocery shelves and being donated to food banks instead of going in the garbage. And that might be coming from different places. It might be coming from Seattle area and coming out to us, or it might be coming locally, Costco's and bigger places like that. So those stats sadly don't feel very robust, but we've got something in now. It takes years to get that data up. Like right now we're working off 2017 data. The state of Washington literally has like one person working on crunching all this data and all sorts of other data. So it's hard to get a good sense.
That poor person. Oh my gosh.
But I feel good that we did get some of that in this year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just a place to start, and we kind of found a home that I think could be a regular reporter. We have a coalition of food banks, and so I went to the person who's currently running the coalition. I was like, "Can you report this on behalf of all the food banks? Mm-hmm. Whoever can get you data." So they got the two big ones, and they put that in. Like, okay, that's a start.
What do you love most about working on these projects?
Well, I've been a fan of composting specifically. I think for a long, long time. Since the year 2000, I think I've been composting, and food waste as well. I think it's always struck me as something that feels wasteful. I've always been a plate cleaner, things like that. So I just can't handle wasting food. And I do have this story that I love of my best friend growing up. Her dad, once he had this like little tiny dish on the table and had this one little piece of tofu in it. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, it's a little piece of tofu that was left over. And I was like, no way, because in my family that would have just been like down the gullet, right? Like the fact that you could save something so small. And so I find it creative and exciting to save food, and I do find that I do respond to it as a low-hanging fruit that feels like it's got a lot of potential for climate. I'm certainly really concerned about climate, and in my job as a solid waste person, recycling is really it's not doing it. It's not having the impact that we wanted. And so, but here's this, this piece of the waste stream that again has just such potential, and for soils, the benefits to soils, and of course the carbon sequestration, and the impact as kind of a renewable energy and a renewable resource. It just feels really exciting to me. I think that's why I like working on those projects. It's part of my vision of a more sustainable future, for sure.
What advice do you have for the general public on getting engaged with this kind of work in their own homes even?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do struggle with it when I'm at home in my own family. It is a harder, it's harder than you think. I do think that right now, actually, there are so much, especially social media. It's really fun. I love it when I find, like, a young chef on TikTok who's, like, cooking to, re-engage, or to reuse leftovers or something like that. I mean, I think that it's becoming a real source of creativity. So I would, encourage people to have fun with it. And, again, I think with our Shrink Food Waste campaign, there are so many fun ideas in there. It's just the cutest. I don't know if you looked through the activity book, but it's super cute, but it's also really applicable for different ages. I mean, you need something fun to do with your family or your kids to challenge yourself. It's not hard to pick something out of there and try to implement that. It's just great about respecting food and food traditions. So I think that's something that can really, again, there's a fun and a important aspect, feeling to it. But for sure, I definitely tell people, I have people come to me and they're so freaked out about recycling. I definitely get those kind of folks, and they're just like, I can't do it right, I can't do this. And I always, tell them, first of all, in terms of the waste stream, remember that actually home composting and reducing your food waste is way more impactful on the climate, and it's kind of way more controllable. So don't focus so much on plastics, but focus on some of the other components. Tin cans, I also tell them to work on, but So if you're not composting, look at composting. And then, I mean, I have big dreams of doing more creative. I would love to do more creative work with food, you know, with local chefs or things like that. Again, the last couple of years have not. We'll see how this summer goes. We used to have like some outdoor feast events or whatever. Crab Fest was one of them, and I always imagined they would have these demos, and I was like, wouldn't it be fun to show sort of like remains of stock, or fish, remains of fish soup or whatever. Getting folks to kind of. Certainly, many of us were raised on food traditions that are actually very good at saving and scrapping our food, and then some of us, like myself, kind of ate out of a box in a can and didn't really have a good food tradition. So I think it's fun that we have an opportunity to connect people with those kind of great tips and tricks, and people are becoming foodies and gourmets, and so in some ways, and they're interested in historical food, so it can be a really fun lesson to deliver, for sure.
Great. Is there anything you want to add that I haven't asked?
Oh, let's see. I mean, again, I think we would like to encourage people, measurement is a great way to sort of help your family see what they are wasting, so take a 5-gallon bucket. Everyone usually has one of those, and just have your family throw stuff in there. I don't know how this would fit in your story, but kind of like that, again, like easy. It's really easy to measure your food waste for a week. And I know that when I open my 5-gallon bucket, because that's how we compost, I've pulled stuff out of there. I'm sure my family would kill me, but I'm like, there's no way that much of the green onion is not used. Pull it out, wash it off,
Well, if they don't know, then whatever.
Yeah, what they don't know won't kill them. So, but I think it can be eye-opening for people, for sure, to take a look at measurement like that. And, I give messages to our local government and our state government. I've tried to give feedback on the development of their plan, the development of our plans, like what's realistic in terms, measurement is really important, but yeah, making it easy for people. Again, like a 5-gallon bucket, nice volume, versus trying to do so much measurement. It can just get really complex. So make it easy, use the visuals to shock people, making that equitable among people across the state, so that they all kind of have. I'm a fan of standardization. Like, let's standardize a way of measuring that's easy, and just sort of do that and not reinvent the wheel, so that we can start to make some progress and implement some actual activities. I mean, I think we do know that we're wasting food. That's we've kind of measured that a lot. So I am a fan of measurement. At the same time as, like, I also feel like it's time to just kind of get going on it. And it, to some degree, although again, like, I take that back then. I mean, there's certainly some projects that if we had more funding and support, like I think I mentioned our climate, we have a climate action group, and it's over at our city, and I'm here at the county government, and I don't know that food waste has even really come up, and it's probably up to me, as like somebody cares about it, to get over there and integrate it. But it's just interesting. We're still like, what are the different pieces that people are working on, and why is it all not coming together?
It takes
get that in there.
It takes time.
It does take time. So, it would be great. Our solid waste management plan, we just finished it. We set a lofty goal to reduce our organics by 10%, from 20% of our waste stream by the year 2025. So a few short years. And I was kind of excited, actually. I just got an email today from a woman who hadn't participated in the plan, making the plan, but she had read that, and she picked right up on it, was all like, this is a lofty goal, here's some ideas about how you could achieve that, even like above and beyond what we had in the plan. So sometimes I guess just having that vision, it's probably our our biggest goal in the plan was to reduce organics, and I'm excited to share that with our community.
How do you guys plan? What are some key points on how to reduce?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, addressing food waste is a big one, because that's hardly rescued in our community. Mm-hmm. That's, again, really doesn't have a lot of action. So it would just be looking at what sort of, I think that's a focus, what you probably talked with Clea about the community kitchen is like, one reason that our food rescue programs have kind of languished is that we don't have a place to rescue it, repackage it, none of that stuff can be done safely. Many of our food banks don't even really have a good like a proper hand washing setup, like the 3-sink. And so that's what Clea has really worked on in WSU is, doing kitchen audits of different food banks and trying to, again, bring together this vision and this a kitchen that can, rescue food, process excess agricultural, abundance locally, and so sort of serve some needs there. So again, I think once we get that kitchen built, again, when you do have someone call and say, we have these 10 pans of lasagna that didn't get used, the whole event got canceled, we might be able to take those and repackage them, or those sandwiches or whatever. So that's exciting. That's definitely been the barrier that we identified. So that's sort of written in our plan, is like continuing to support kind of equipment or other things that can actually help us implement food rescue and food recovery. So that's a big one. Home composting education is always a big one, and that's been kind of piecemeal.
How do you, I mean, I don't know how detailed the plan is at this point, but like, how might you be looking at educating people for like to do stuff in their own homes?
Right. I mean, so since I've been at my job since about 2014, I have been the compost educator for our county, and and I've tried different things to educate other folks. I mean, I did have Master Composter classes for a while, and it's been really difficult as one person doing other jobs to sort of get people excited about teaching others and feeling confident to teach others. So since I've actually been pulled into other directions, that piece that used to be part of my main job, and then I've gotten other duties, so that's fallen to the wayside. But we did start compost demonstrations in all of in a lot of community gardens, so we were trying to have classes for folks to compost. I mean, when you're teaching them about composting, it's also a good opportunity to teach them about reducing their food waste, to talk about, I always kind of couched it from a climate and food waste perspective. And again, it would be great to do, the kind of measure, getting them to measure, having contests about measuring their food waste and having that discussion and put that in the paper and try to wake people up a little bit. There's good stats, of course, about how much money it means that you are wasting every year, for food that you could have eaten otherwise. I would love to have a more robust education program through our local governments, but again, it's been, kind of a piecemeal here and there project, and we just haven't had the staff time to really grow that so much. But I feel like we've definitely done a lot over the years of just, building little pieces of the kind of food waste reduction infrastructure.
Well, that is where Shrink Food Waste program comes in, and educating kids will have a spillover effect to their parents, so that's good.
Yes, definitely the schools for sure. I mean, one I think exciting thing, as it sounded like Clea and Melanie shared with you, is that one person that attended one of our recent trainings was an AmeriCorps volunteer, and so they're hoping to do a hands-on curriculum. That's what we haven't had any teachers really bite on, doing a hands-on curriculum, and I know they felt really overwhelmed the last year.
Yeah.
And this, again, our Shrink Food Waste it coincided with the pandemic, so it definitely had its challenges in that kind of rollout. But yes, if we could, it would be great, again, to get an educational specialist who could go into the schools and even just teach one hands-on activity from this book, and then that might encourage the teachers to pick it up as a full curriculum, or send it home as an extracurricular.
Yeah.
Or just at least send the link home, send the cards home, and let people talk about that. But yeah, that's been hard to get a lot of bite on this year. We've sent a lot of emails and kind of tried to talk to teachers when we can, but they have certainly been overwhelmed. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel for them.
We'll continue, because again, it's a cute, definitely a great curriculum. So I think it's just got so much opportunity to get folks engaged.
Great, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time to tell me about all this great stuff, and I will be working on putting the draft together, and I'm hoping to be able to send everybody a copy by like early or middle of next week, maybe late next week, we'll see. But and yeah, you can just review it and make sure everything's accurate. And I don't think I'll have, I might have a few small little tiny follow-up questions, if you don't mind me. Like, is email a good way to send those little requests? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not at all. That would be great. I was going to mention, if you hadn't ran into it already, that Montreal, Canada, and Merida, Mexico are also been piloting that Shrink Food Waste.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I am going to reference the original CEC report that kind of founded the program. I'm going to take a little look at that report, and also the one you sent me. I didn't have a chance to look at it yet. But yeah, it'd be good to have those as references in the story too. I'm gonna take a look at the curriculum as well. It's been kind of crazy. I'm doing like 3 stories in 1 week, so it's been pretty hectic. But
sounds fun.
Yeah, I love this project.
Catherine Hayhoe. So.
Oh right, yeah. She was on she was on our board for this project and recommended a bunch of different projects to look into. Yeah. Yeah,
I bet she knows.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right. Well,
yes. Any questions? I appreciate the opportunity, and whatever works out.
Yep.
Right.
Thanks, and I'll be in touch again at the very least by next week with a draft. All right. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the good weather here.
Yep.
Bye.